I argue that near is better than far, small than big, and simple than complex. And in the footnotes, and you know about this, you've heard about it, use Helvetica type, and it's 5 point. And the footnotes, there are 2 more points. Don't argue points in 5 or 10 or even 95, as Luther did at the theses on the Wittenberg church door 500 years ago. Don't argue 95. Argue 3, as I do. 3 is always a palatable number, and everything indeed will fit into a trinity of points. The subpoints at 5 point type, sans serif type, of course, Helvetica is this, that personal is better than corporate. And then there's this, that physical is better than abstract. As Mark McKnight would suggest to you in inviting you to reflection, writing Arboretum and Nature Center, take a walk for an hour and look at the trees and get the sun on your face and bend over and smell the ferns and smell the odd little flower down there in the by the rocks, and have a physical existence rather than one on your iPad or your online connection. This is David Tulis, and we're brought to you by Nooganomics.com, the website for the man who matters, that investigates, you might say, deep state questions. Deep state questions. We have one in Tennessee. We have a deep state. It mirrors that of the national powers, with all of this the same kind of magic that operates there, operates in Tennessee as well, and also in your state, if you happen to be not from Tennessee but just passing through. The same situation operates there. We call it, for convenience, commercial government, and that is the subsuming or the subsumption of the private sector, private life, into the state, where all things have their being, all things are found to be true, and in the state there is a fulfillment of all human desires, all care, all love, all nurture is found there. And that is what we're supposed to believe. There's some fraying, though, on this fabric, this cultural fabric, and we can see it even in Veterans Day, which is a pro-war event, kind of a pro-military event. And originally, Veterans Day was Armistice Day, remembering the war to end all wars, right? The American involvement costing hundreds of thousands of American lives in a foreign adventure in Europe, where all the men came back smoking, and many came back with the Spanish flu that brought a pandemic in 1918 to the American people. Well, I think that there's reason to doubt this narrative. There's reason to doubt this sort of narratorial superstructure over which we have to give recognition of its success. It's very successful. And yet, I think we want to understand it sufficiently as to not fear it. That's why sometimes I give notice of it and try to provide a sense that you know what it's about, and that you can teach your son differently than what you've done. I think it's going to be hard going, though, and I'm looking in saying that at the homeschool sector. Now, homeschooling is something that hundreds of families do in Chattanooga, in the Chattanooga area, maybe 700 families, 800, 900 families, no more than that, I'm supposing. And there's not a lot of interest in something that's been for a long time concern to me, and that is the assertion of liberties that God gave us. Right? We have, in this educational sector, we have the liberty of home education, fought for by court cases, and you can read about those at Nooganomics.com, that traces some of the human suffering that went into bringing about a change in the educational statute, in the compulsory attendance provisions that allow for this godly activity, very market-oriented, non-taxpayer subsidized, and I'd say encouraging, because it's Americans doing their own thing, Americans getting by without the man, right? Americans having a solution, having a workaround to a problem. In that sector, you would think there'd be some encouragement by dads of their sons, particularly because I think the sons are the ones who are the defenders of the weak and the innocent. Now, of course, women do that too in our egalitarian age, but I really want to emphasize sons, partly because this is a program for men. My show is aimed at the sort of atestosteronal man, not you, of course, but the other guy who needs a bit of testosterone in his thinking, so that he can be more assertive, more independent, and less whining, less cowering, less caviling, less quivering, as many American men are very much in that direction. They're always calling up, they're always offended, right? They're always calling on government intervention. They're always calling on the need for Congress to act, right? This is what we have in the American man. He's not independent really anymore. He's not an outdoorsy type, as Mark McKnight would suggest he be. And he's not really very masculine. And I say this because I'm just thinking about Worth County, Georgia. Back in April, in Worth County, there were 900 high school students in a criminal act by a state actor, the sheriff of that county, who lined Jeff Hobby by name, lined up with his deputies, all 900 students of Worth County High School, in an illegal search. He was searching for drugs. His own son, as it turns out, was involved in a little bit drug peddling, drug trading among friends, as it turns out later. But he was having a mass search. Mass searches are illegal. There was not individualized suspicion, or you could say individuated suspicion. There was no probable cause. It was just something he planned to do, and the officials all stood by. The school administration stood by, and the courageous young men, football players, basketball players, wrestlers, all stood by as sexual assault happened en masse. Okay, en masse is French for in the mass, in the whole, among all the victims of this criminal act. It's a criminal act, and the district attorney of that county rightly brought an indictment for the violation of oath. It was all done without warrant and individual suspicion. Now, I'm thinking about this question and saying, why is a man who's got his hands on the wall, right? He's got his hands on the wall, and they're there it goes for hours. This thing lasted for hours. Meanwhile, it was a 4-hour lockdown. They were told to stand with their legs and hands apart. And deputies touched and manipulated girls' breasts and genitals. They inserted fingers inside girls' bras. They pulled up girls' bras. They touched partially exposed bare breasts. According to reports, they touched girls' underwear by placing hands inside the waistbands of their pants, reached up their dresses. They touched girls' private areas through their underwear. They cut or groped boys' genitals and touched their buttocks through their pants, according to the class action lawsuit. There's been an indictment and a class action lawsuit, and that's some of the detail from the civil case. Now, why, according to the report, I'm making, I think, a slight assumption. Why was did no boy get into trouble for saying, you can't do that? You have to stop. You don't have authority to do that. You better get your hands off of her. She's done nothing wrong. Do you suspect her of a crime? Well, no wrestler had the courage to do anything. No football player had the courage to get the deputy's hands off of the innocent girl's private parts next to him. They all stood there, bluffed. They were bluffed into silence. They were bluffed into thinking this was law. This was the law. And sometimes this is what the law does. It's painful, but this is how it works. We just really can't do anything about it. Well, for one, there should have been a sense of moral outrage in the heart of at least one young man who would have said, "You're sexually assaulting this girl. You better stop." No matter what the law said, no matter what the pretended authority said, he should have said, "You're sexually assaulting the girl, in my view, and I'm an eyewitness against you. You better stop." Right? Not a boy who didn't know the law, but who had that as his outrage, who said that and had that as his outrage. No public school kid, apparently, judging by the reporting on this matter, said that. And no one, of course, had been taught in civics class what their rights are, so no one knew to say, you don't have individuated probable cause. You can't search me and assume I'm guilty and stop me and waylay me apart from probable cause. And no, I'm walking out of here. No one did that. No one challenged legally this crime of a mass search. It was a crime. It was a crime by the county sheriff and his deputies. It was a crime and a tort, and no one of the other students thought to say anything. But the question is, what about among boys whose parents might know better, among boys whose dads have heard about this, know something about their own defense in the law. And if you go to Nooganomics.com, you can read my take on this question. And I have some suggestions for you, my listener, that I suggest you not just pass by. And there are two words, just as there are two words that can end the jail crowding crisis in Helena County. Two words that can be enforced by Judge Steelman and Judge Poole and the other criminal court judge, as well as Sessions judges, Lila Statham, for example. They can all have two words and say, "Don't bring a case before me unless this test is met." And if those two words were uttered out of the law, out of the Tennessee Code, and out of Christianity, if those two words are honored, then we solve our jail crowding crisis. We solve it. We solve it, and in fact, we end the police state. We can end the police state today if these judges simply utter the two words. And you're not going to find out what those two words are unless you go to Nooganomics.com, because this is the kind of thing I discuss. I discuss these things not as idols, not as fantasies, but they are in fact the law, and they control what people do, and they can control what other people do if those in authority will utter them and speak them. Now, in the case of the Worth County case, there were two words that the young man should have uttered. And this is David Tulis, caller. You're live on my program. What's on your mind?
I want to bring up, David, I don't know many people that have gotten information on this or know this, but there's a change in, let me turn this down, in the support structure for deadbeat dads. It looks like Tennessee changed this, that a parent can only go back 5 years of arrears. And this is 36-2-311A11. So that's in effect. They slid that in, that if a deadbeat dad or mom, normally a dad, owes 6 or 7 or 8 years, whatever, anything after 5 years, the person can't go back for child support. What do you see wrong with this picture? What is wrong with the state that's denying your woman her due process to collect money for herself and her child from a deadbeat dad? Right.
Yeah, alimony. The term alimony is from Latin, and it refers to food and sustenance. That's what it means: food and sustenance. That the husband owes the wife, even though in divorce he owes it to her.
Yeah, this is not alimony. This is child support. There's a difference. This goes to the child, and
it's ordered by the judge.
And well, they're a joke in Tennessee. I've been there about 4 or 5 times over the past 3 years, and Maximus is a joke. And they, you know what, David?
What is Maximus?
The judicial system in Chattanooga, and what I see, should be embarrassed. I hear them come on your show and they talk about, but you know what? They're an embarrassment. I've sat through proceedings, and they just let these people get away with it. And let me tell you the difference between, and I don't often compare the northern states, but the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, if a dad misses 2 or 3 payments, he's going to go to jail. And this state, they just slap their hands. And I know you target males, and I think those males have a responsibility to pay for their kids and stop being deadbeat dads. And I'd like to hear, an excuse as to why these dads can't make a payment of $25 a week or $40 a week, whether it's scrubbing toilets or working extra at McDonald's to support their kids. And if there's any women listening that have gone through this, you realize you better get to an attorney, because it appears that if this is more than 5 years in arrears, that you're not going to be able to get the money that's owed to your child. And this is real, and it's happening now. And David, I don't know how we fix this other than educating an entire society, because these judges are nothing more than lawyers with gavels. And lawyers, I mean, come on, what do they have the ability to do? Plea bargain and lose. There hasn't been law taught in American law schools since 1927. People need to realize that. Law is not taught. These attorneys do not go to law libraries anymore. Their assistants do all their work. And 99% of the cases are plea bargained. There's no law in America. Where's the law? I mean, look what's happening now when we're seeing that all you have to you no longer call them a racist. Just have someone to make an accusation against them, and automatically they're supposed to go away. You know, when you have a satanic country that allows the murdering of unborn children, this is what happened. This is Rome. We're in the middle of Rome falling. American Rome is falling because we turn our back on the ones that need it most, which is the unborn and the children and the women that have been abandoned by, and in a lot of cases, men that have been abandoned by their women, and they have an obligation to take care of their kids. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Pennsylvania. I'm looking at the 95 Theses of Abolition, which is a rising movement in Christianity, which proposes not just the accommodation of abortion and the tinkering along the edges of it, Mike, but the abolition. It says, this is out of Pennsylvania, that there are 30,000 people a year murdered in Pennsylvania by surgical abortion, and that it equates to roughly 10 9/11 terrorist attacks every year in just one small corner of the state, and it's equated to a child sacrifice, common not only in the recently secularized culture but also in the church. This statement says, together with supporting evils like pornography, homosexuality, adultery, and no-fault divorce. But the question about the deadbeat dead, to get back to what you're saying, I'm concerned about the idea of debtor's prison. Here's a man who's lost his job, even though we're in almost a full employment economy. He's lost his job, and he just can't get it together to make the payment. And now he's under arrest and in jail.
Crap. It's all a bunch of crap. The man that can't get a job. Anybody can get a job. Come on. You can start your own lawn service. Go buy a lawnmower. You know, these guys quit their jobs. It's a bunch of crap. They don't want to work for minimum wage.
Are you saying
fast food restaurants are looking for people? Stop making excuses.
You're right.
Yeah, this is like the Democrats that are protesting over statues and the mayor. What a bunch of phonies. I mean, you know, Republicans are cowards. Democrats are phonies. You've got men sleeping on the streets in Chattanooga, homeless, freezing, shivering. And what is this mayor doing? Building bike paths? Are you serious? Building bike paths while there are people sleeping on the street? Mayor Burke should be embarrassed.
Well,
He's another coward Democrat because he won't go on your show either.
Well,
I don't. You know what? I'm tired of these excuses that dads and kids. Get a job at McDonald's.
well, listen, Mike.
Clean toilets.
Okay.
You know, they should go to jail for 30 days. And how's it feel now to be in jail? And you know what they should be fed? Water and
They're
bread.
fed white bread.
Be put in a cell by themselves. They should be thrown a crusty old piece of bread and maybe a glass of water a day for 30 days and say, if you don't find a way to feed your kids, you're coming back for another 30 days. You've got a week.
Okay, listen, Mike, thanks very much. I think the point about Mayor Burke is not quite just. You can't really say, well, the mayor shouldn't do anything about the livability requirements of the city, like bike paths. He can't do that until he gives a shelter for every homeless person on the city's dime. That's not reasonable. And the reason it's not reasonable, Mike, you're putting up you're claiming somehow that that's the mayor's responsibility and authority. He doesn't have. That's not his place to give a bed for every homeless veteran. It's just not his place. In fact, if you're arguing for that, it sounds like you're arguing for more of the kind of socialism that you seem to be quite weary of on many other points. No, we don't want the mayor doing that. That's not his job. But I think if there is an expectation from Mayor Burke, it's that he not try to manage the marketplace through the zoning apparatus and the stormwater scheme that we have, according to Chris Long, makes it prohibitive for poor people to live in town. And that's always what happens whenever you have state control and you have the elites in control of housing. You make the prices of properties go higher, and that's not done by the mayor necessarily personally, but by the whole political class, and that would be the political parties and all the effete, well-to-do people who like rising housing values and rising housing market in Chattanooga, of course, all fed on credit. That keeps the poor away from their jobs. They have to drive into town in their old cars to work as maids and cleaning people, and they can't live nearby. And I have a call here, but I'm afraid Yes, you have a minute. You have half a minute.
Socialism is government control of production and distribution. Worrying about people that are living in your streets as the highest administrative officer in your city is your job. Everything that happens in that city, if it were a mall can be taken care of first, not like.
Okay, listen, I'm sorry, your phone is distorting me, and I can't hear the last part of your sentence. But this is David Tulis, and we're chatting with Mike about the role of the mayor and deadbeat dads. I'm thinking that it would be good for you, my listener, and your son to subscribe to Nooganomics.com. If you just subscribe, you'll have every other day or so an article, often of a legal nature, that looks at things that are, I would say, your rights. Okay? We do a lot of work on your rights and asserting them. Let's not live in fear. Let's live as free people, confident of God's grace and mercy. David Tulis.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.